We can get going. So hello and welcome, and a special hello to those of you who aren't joining me live. I know we have several returning learners and some new ones this time around. So this may well be the first time that you have seen my face walking and talking at the same time. So hello and welcome. I'm Julie, your host of these series of 8 sessions of Zoom Flower Class. I'm starting off quite formally. That's a proper welcome. I'm sure you have everything to hand. You've had your handouts. You know this is an 8-week course, but we're taking a break for half term. So it's 4 weeks, a week off, and then 4 weeks. So we end at the towards the end of November. As I say, you've got your handouts. It may be that you decide that you want to watch the video, ask questions when I take you off mute in a moment at the end of the session, or you want to work along with me. So it's entirely up to you what you decide to do. So I know that some of the ladies that come never make the projects that we talk about. They're here for the community and for the chat. And if you like that side of things, it's really good if you can join live, because we do have the second half of the session when I continue making, and those of you that make with me continue making, and you come off mute and you can show your work and you can interact, and we have a right old catch up. Those of you who've been here before know exactly what I mean. So if you're watching the recorded video, you will get my teaching part of the class, but you won't get the chat afterwards. And not to worry if you decide to come on live, I only have the camera facing on me. So the chat that we do have afterwards, I will stop the recording so that you can speak freely, because your face and your voice and what you're saying won't appear on the video that goes out afterwards. So after the class, what I have to do is I have to save the video from Zoom, and I have to download it, upload it, and do lots of things behind the scenes before it comes a private YouTube video. So I do aim to get the videos out to you as long with an email and a reminder about next week's class on the Tuesday evening, subject to what I've got going on now. First week back, I've actually got a couple of appointments this afternoon, so I won't be able to sit straight away at my desk and do the editing. So I will say that you will get it early evening is my intention, but some afternoons you will get it a little bit earlier if I haven't got things that I need to be doing roundabout. So there will be a short delay because it just takes a little bit of time just to sort out the videos, and it depends how strong my Wi-Fi is with all that downloading and uploading. So before we go on much further, I just want to make sure that you can remember where the chat box is. So I'm working on my laptop. If I hover my mouse at the bottom of the screen, I can bring up that chat box. So at any time during my demonstration part of the class that you've got a question you want to ask, as long as I catch it in the corner of my eye, I can respond to you live verbally. If I do miss it, I will sweep up any comments that I've missed when we come to the live Q&A. So to start things off, I've got a question for you. What material have you bought for class? So have you got the lily grass, which is over my shoulder, not the straight up and down one? That's Formium Tenax. Let me know in the comments the name of the material you're working with today, whether that's you've decided to go for the lily grass, or whether you're going for China grass. I know was some talk about bear grass and flexi grass, whether you're going to use Formium Tenax, or whether you're not bringing anything because you just want to see what happens. So it'd be a great one to get us going, just to make sure you know how that chat box works. Or if you can't comment, you don't want to say, just let me know whether you're staying on for the Make and Create. Lovely. I have seen some lily grass in the audience. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So for today's project, we are going to be making, I think I've called it three flower frogs. So we're going to be making something that will support our flowers, but in a designer kind of way. So I should perhaps say at the beginning of the course that the flowers you'll need for class for all the classes are going to be absolutely minimal, possibly even no flowers at all. So for today, I have got with me my signature flower, my statement flower, which is a yellow dahlia. And then I've also got just a drinking glass for the flowers. There's a few stems of Japanese maple, and then I've got some perpetual wallflower purple, some salvia, and the flower I can never remember the name of, Verbena bonararis. I don't know how you say that one later. Right, I'm having, I can see there we've got some Formium tenax that's being used as well, and staying on for a short chat, but not making and creating. So those are the minimal flowers that I've got. I've also got today my floristry scissors, and I've suggested to you that you have some floristry glue. So the kindest glue you can use for your flowers is this Oasis Floral Fix. The problem with this is, from my teaching point of view, although it's kind to your plant materials, it doesn't have an instant stick. So I'm actually going to be quite cruel to my flowers, because I want my materials to stick instantly. I've actually got my hot glue gun heating up at the sides. So it just depends what you feel more comfortable with, using the floral fix that takes a little while, floral adhesive that takes a little while to glue, or whether you want to go instantly with your hot glue. And in terms of containers, I have just got things I found around the house. I have got a clear glass, well, it's slightly cloudy in the dishwasher one too many times, a little cup here. I have got a sparkling clear drinking glass, a high tumbler. This was my version of a bud vase. I couldn't find a vase that was the same, the height and size that I wanted. And then probably my most sort of specialist dish is my square. This is actually an acrylic dish, and this would be, if you didn't have something square like this, you would be using a Pyrex casserole dish, something like that. So it's about making do with what you've got, and try not to get too het up thinking, oh goodness me, I've got class next week and there's just too many complicated things to buy. You're welcome just to watch the classes and then think, oh, I know exactly where I'm going with this project. I'll sort out what I need. Or just bring the closest thing you've got, and then during the make and create sessions, when we can chat freely, we can talk about adaptions, you know, whether you've got different plant materials, whether you've got different containers to me. We can talk about that later. So you can see over my shoulder that I have got my lily grass, and I've got a Formium tenax leaf, and that's because I knew that some of you were choosing not to use lily grass for glass, and I said I would show you how to use your Formium tenax. So with the lily grass, this is what it looks like, and I thought it'd be quite nice. We're keeping our budgets under control because we're not using loads of flowers, but sometimes it is nice to use a plant material that's just a little bit different. So this is lily grass. It's wider than a bear grass. It's dark green, but it has some flexibility to it. It's nice and pliable, and you can see the difference here with my Formium tenax. You may well have some growing in the garden, but it's a stronger stem, and when you come to use your Formium tenax, what you will have to do if you're choosing to use this is you will need to split it into individual bits in order that you can try and replicate what I'm doing with your Formium tenax. It is, as I say, slightly stiffer, so what I've done there, I've pierced it with my fingernail, and then I'm running along, and that would give you a piece of plant material to work with that was reasonably similar to that first bit of lily grass that I showed you. So you can adapt the techniques, and it's, you know, perhaps you haven't got Formium tenax in your garden, but you might have some creeping vines, Virginia creeper or clematis, or perhaps you might even have some soft and supple pliable silver birch twigs. It's about thinking about the technique, challenging yourself about how you can adapt it to the materials that you've readily got to hand. So today's class is small and delicate, and projects I'm going to show you aren't difficult to do, but they will require a degree of dexterity, and if you wear glasses for close work, this might be the time to whip your glasses out. So it's going to be lots of close work to give something that looks super stylish, and for me, using my glassware, a very modern pared back look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my second camera. I don't want to shock you because you can immediately see on my table here, I've got a pair of skewers and some tapestry wool. The reason why I've got those is I'm going to show you how to do a knot to fix your pieces of grass together to create the frog we're going to put our minimal flowers in. And the easiest way for me to demonstrate this, first of all, is with some materials that aren't going to misbehave and some colourful wool, in order that you can actually see what I'm doing. So do not be alarmed. This is purely demonstration only. And if you can't work out what I'm doing when I come to do this with my live materials, if you play the video back, you will be able to see more clearly what I am doing. So I have got everyday kebab sticks and I'm putting them together. I need to tie them together. And what I'm going to do is to take my yarn and make a loop in it. If I leave it like that on the table, oh, it's misbehaving, but I've got a loop there. I pick the loop up with quite a long tail to the loop and I lay it on top of my kebab sticks. So I've got the short tail there and the long tail going off over there. And what I'm going to do is to wrap my long tail around across the top of my kebab sticks like this. So I'm sort of working back towards my non-winding hand. And you can see I've left that starter tail off. So bear with me as I do this. So I'm keeping the loop at the end. I've got my loose tail here and I'm working back up towards the loop. Now you can, so when you come and do this with your leaves, you decide how much of a chunky bit here you have. But when you've done as much as you want, you might only want, you know, a finger width or 2 finger widths. It's entirely up to you. But when you've got as far as you want to do with your wrapping and you feel that what you've got is secure, you take your end of your long piece of cord, your wool, your leaf, this will be, and you thread it through that loop. So I'm just going from underneath. I'm sure it doesn't make a difference at all. So I've threaded that through the loop like that. And then I hold that in my hand just to keep it out of the way, light pressure, and then I'm going to pull on this short piece. And as I pull on the short piece, watch the loop. The loop will disappear as it gets pulled down into the heart of the winding. Like that. So I've ended up with my bound pieces, but I've got my original short tail and my long tail still there. And what I'm going to do is to cut those excess pieces off. And I've invested in a pair of short, sharp scissors in order that I can get really close. Sometimes I find my floristry scissors are just too chunky. So without cutting the bound over wool, I'm getting rid of those tails. And we're going to be doing exactly the same thing, but using our grasses to do that next time round. So that's just hopefully a clear visual with highly contrasting materials so you can understand what I'm doing there. So I'm going to move that out of the way. So for our first project, I'm going to bring in my little cup and I'm going to bring in my first lot of grasses. And if you're using your Formium Tenax, you will need to break it down so you've got slimmer pieces to use. So for this project, I'm actually going to break down my grass even more. So doing exactly the same thing I showed you when the camera was facing me, sliding my fingernail in there to make a hole and just slide my finger in and it'll pull the grasses apart because I'm going for an ultra delicate look. Now, ideally, I would have cut that grass in half, and I've got not very good fingernails. And let me see if I can cut that with my scissors. I was thinking I would slice this piece of grass in half, and I've managed to end up with it going into thirds. But that will not matter at all. There we go. Oops, still not managed quite to do it properly. There, that is better. So I've got my split grass. So I'm ending up, what I want is 2 pieces of grass. So it doesn't matter that I've not quite got them accurate. Imagine these two pieces of grass are my kebab sticks. I then want to split my grass down to make the wool, the red wool that I used. And the way I do this, you can either, if you're really good with your fingernails, keep splitting. But what I've got here is a pin holder, and I'm going to use that as a comb. And it will break up the grass. Perhaps if I'd done that sooner, that would have been the easiest way to do it. And that's going to give me pieces of string, let's call it, to tie my grasses together. So I've got my two slightly thicker pieces of grass, and I'm going to hold those in my hand. Imagine they are my kebab sticks. Just going to have this. I only need to do a little bit. What I'm going to end up doing is to have these balancing across the edge of the jar. I'm going to see if I can just pair it up so it doesn't look obvious. I've got a thick stem and a fat stem, just match them as closely as possible. So I hold those in my hand, and then I take one of my fine pieces of grass, so this would be my red wool, and I make a loop. And I then come across, so I've looped my grass round like that. I'm catching it underneath my finger. And then with the longer end of that grass I've just split, I'm going to do exactly what I did with my wool. And what I'm doing is kind of go quite neatly and tightly back towards the loop. So there was hardly anything there for me to show you. Go back and back. Now I'm going to go back I'm just going to use up the length of the grass I've got, leaving me enough to thread through. So I've probably gone a centimetre, something like that. And then I take that end of the grass and I thread it up through the loop, and then gently, gently pull on that tail end of the grass, and that pulls the loop, the piece of grass that went through the loop, it pulls it inside the body of the wrapping, like that. And then that's just snapped off there. I would have rather have cut that off, so I had to control and just cut off the excess. So I've got my two pieces of grass bound together at one end. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other end of the grass. So I'm imagining it's going to again lie across the top of my little container. You decide whether you want an overhang or not, or whether you want the knots in the middle and the tail ends going across. I think I might like my knot, the two knots to be inside the glass. So I put my two lengths together again. I take up my cut pieces of grass string, make a loop again, light over the top. So you can see why I did the example with the red wool, because green on green isn't showing up. And then I am wrapping round, going back from that short tail end up to the loop that I've created. And the more times you do this, the more practice you have, the more little of these skewer type things that you're making, the more finesse your workmanship will become. That maybe the first time you do this, it doesn't quite work. You'll just have to set your grass aside and start again. So I'm finding that loose end and I'm pulling gently. And as I do, the longer piece of grass sort of gets eaten up a little bit, like that. What I'll do is when I send out the email to accompany the video, I will take a close-up photograph so you can see what my little placement looks like. So I've got two pieces of grass bound at each end, which I can then lay across the open mouth of my cut and then trim the whole lot to fit. Whether you want a blunt end, I might go crazy and have a diagonal cut at the end, just to give a little extra detail. And at that stage, you would put your water into your cup, because your fresh plant material, your flower, your feature flower, will need a little bit of water to keep alive. I'm not actually going to do that at the moment because I'm rather fearful of filming and having fresh water all over the place. So what I will do is take one of my flowers, and you can see how small they are, tiny, tiny flowers. And I will show you what to do here. So depending on how tight your fixings are, you might need to use your kebab stick to sort of open up the hole here, to give you space to slide your flowers through. And you can see here, I have picked quite a tiny flower that is quite lightweight. If you have anything too heavy in here, you'll find that it doesn't balance properly. So in profile, that is what we're going to do. The whole point of those knots was to allow the flowers to be suspended. And then when I put my water in my cup like that, the flowers will be in water. So that is the first project. So as I say, it's not difficult to do, but you just need to put your glasses on and have a tiny bit of patience. But once you've mastered these knots, you can then go on to the second project. So I'll just put that across to one side, come across to the second project. And this is the glass or the square container. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create just a template, and I'll show you why. I'm going to draw around my container. And this is going to give me a guide. I'm just going to do the outside edges like that because my container is pretty much as wide as my, draw around your container like this. So you've got these outside edges. I know my container is this big. The next flower frog we're going to make is actually going to sit inside the container, not to be balanced on top. So when you come and make your next flower frog, I'm envisaging something that is going to sit inside the container like this. And because it's going to have more than one piece of grass, it's going to sort of sit, it's going to look like this. And you can see that as I go round and round and round, there's lots of little holes in there for you to put your flowers through. And we're going to do this knot wherever it needs to be to hold everything together. And you'll end up with something that looks a little bit like that. So this was the image that I showed you. And the reason why I've just adapted my technique a bit, I thought it was a bit big for my dish. So I've made this template and I'm going to put my grasses together. And as I work, I'm going to just be mindful of the size I want. I think the temptation when you're doing this is to think about the outside edge of the container, and you may find you've made a beautiful flower frog which doesn't actually fit inside your container. So for this, we need some more split down Formium tenax or some more of the lily grass or whatever grass material you are using. I am going to keep this full thickness. So if you are using your Formium tenax, probably I would say, depending on the width of your tenax, you'd probably be able to divide your Formium tenax into 6 strips, and they probably end up about this size. But I will need some of my stringy little bits to act as my string. So I might need to just use my pin holder again, which I've momentarily, oh, here it is, hiding behind my glass. I'm going to use my pin holder again. Your pin holder ends up looking, you know, like it's a bit got detritus in it. And what I should have done really was got an old tight or something like that. When you get a ladder in your tights, save the tights and put it over the top, and it just makes it cleaning off easier. So I'm resting on the top and sliding it through, and remembering that the prongs are sharp. So it may be, oops, I'll stick that one there, that you may want to do it from the other edge, but I've ended up creating my little bits of string just like that. Now, one thing you might want to do if you are getting creative is that you might want to create some curls for your decorative flower frog. And what I've done here, that this is, I've got my split lily grass here, but also I've split my Formium tenax. And I did this morning, and I've wrapped it around a kebab stick. And when I take the kebab stick out, it just gives me some pieces, if I wanted them, that have got a bit more of a curl to them. And I can add those on to my flower frog as a decorative detail at the end. And of course, the tighter you wrap around your kebab stick, the tighter your curl will be. But having said that, as soon as this gets wet, it'll go straight again. So it's just another option if you want to add something decorative into your little design here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of this stubby bit here. It's the white growth to begin with, and because I've had this grass for a week or so now, I'm going to get rid of the bit that looks a bit aged. So I'm just snapping that off, and then using my little template here, I'm going to start halfway down my line. I'm not going to start at the edge because that's going to give me a really sharp point. I want to sort of bury the cut end. So I'm going to push it in here, and every time I get to the corner of my template, I take my lily grass and I give it quite a sharp bend. Of course, it won't stay right angled for very long, but a nice pinched bend so I can start to get that, that grid shape. So it will all move a little bit. It's natural plant material. It won't always behave. So you just need to bear with it and work through. And hopefully, if you've got a whole bunch of grass, you know, if it goes wrong, you can just start again with your next bit of grass. So I've got there my first structure here, and I need to tie that together, and I'm going to use that knot that I've showed you before. So you're going to be well practiced with this knot by the end of the session. So I make my loop, light on the top, take the long stem end and wrap that round and round. Now, don't go too tight. Whereas the other ones, I wanted it tight to hold. I'm doing this tight enough that it holds, but not so tight that I haven't got any room for movement. So take that loose end, that very fine end there, thread it through the loop at the end, and then gently, gently pull on what was the shorter end to hide that second stem. Whether the camera is picking that up like that, and then with my super fine scissors again, cutting off the excess, just because I can get closer to my small scissors than I can with my chunky floristry scissors. So we've got one round here, and then the reason why I've said don't bind too tightly, I'm going to take my second stem, I'm going to cut it at an angle, and I'm going to do the same thing. And what I'm doing here, you've just seen, this is my stubby bit of grass here. I'm going to put my next bit of grass in the other direction, and I'm going to try and thread it underneath that fixing that I've just made. Is it going in? I'm getting caught on my dahlia there. It's going in, but not as far as I really wanted it to. I'm not going to worry. I'm going to follow that round and snap this into place. So as you go round, try not to make your flower frog grow, the square grow. If anything, I would make it slightly smaller each time so it sits inside. It's not going to be perfect. We don't want it to be perfect because we want to make sure there are enough holes ready. Now, rather neatly, I've started there and I could finish with the same binding point. So let's have a go at doing that. Slide these in, but it's not a case of can I get this all done just with one knot. You will need to, that's gone through more smoothly there. You see that's coming through. You will need to use as many fixings as you need to. I pulled that too tight to hold it in place. So just to give me a bit more stability, I'm going to go through, and I might do a fixing on every corner. So I take my grass. This is slightly thicker than the other pieces I've used. I'll work with that. Make my loop. I'm going to hold it here. This was in the middle. I'm going to just offset it. I don't want this to look too sort of geometric. So taking the longer end, wrapping it round and back over towards the loop. Go one more time. So it's got the working there, and my loop is just standing proud there to come up like that. Thread it through, and then pull down on the bit that was left when you started, like that, and then you can cut off your loose ends. So I'm hoping there you've got the flow of what I was going to do, and then you would add in more and more pieces of grass. This one doesn't want to hold, that keeps pinging out, So what I'll do that knot one more time. I'm going to do it in a slightly different place. So it's that the fine balance, like everything we do when we're working with flowers. You don't want to over-engineer it, but you do want to make sure things hold nicely in place. And if that end keeps pinging out, I'm just going to cut it off. But don't be a martyr to it. If it's not working, trim back and start again. So I've done not exactly the same way. That pinged off, cut that there, and I'm going to just snip that there. So you're ending up with this little box frame. So I use 3 pieces on here, and I would say if I was doing this again, I would say 3 pieces as the minimum. Straight piece there. I would probably go for 4 pieces, I think. So this is my little frame that's been sitting in water for about a week. So let's say that's my finished piece, and then I will come in with my container. Imagine I've put water in here and it'll float up a little bit. So you need to do exactly the same thing you did with your first little balanced arrangement there, and put your flowers in. So again, don't go too heavy. I'm cutting down my Japanese anemone here. If you put the flowers on that are too actually heavy, like a rose, this isn't going to work with a rose. It's going to pull everything off to one side. If I cut a tiny bit shorter, you can imagine that the little anemone floating there, it's got quite, you know, a big wide petal base. It's going to lie across all the containers. You could, all the grasses. You could just leave one flower there, or you could think, well, I want to go all the way around. I think I wouldn't go all the way around because you want to show off some of this design work, but you might perhaps want to go, you know, another full-sized anemone here, and perhaps adding in some of the buds as you go. So that bit is entirely up to you, and it's fiddly. So just take your time. When you put the water in here, it will be a feat of balance. So we talk about our principles and elements of floristry design. Your balance here, even though everything is really lightweight, the whole structure is lightweight. So you just need to make sure it's not rocking and rolling. And again, I'll take a photograph of this with the water in so you can see exactly what I mean. So this is just a combination of the two first principles of getting to grips with the magic knot here and using it as a sort of pair of chopsticks to hold in place, or to develop the idea and to create this grid here. So perhaps, you know, if you want to liken it to another technique, this might be the way that you weave a willow circlet to make a wreath on. So the difference is we've used something green, we're making hard creases, and we are lashing it together. So we're sort of keeping that geometric look. So I'm looking forward to seeing whether you've got any questions on that later. Shall we move on to the last little project that we've got ready for you today? And I'm going to put this together like that. This one is to create a round ball. So again, you would have seen the photographs of this. I can't tip it over too much because, of course, the water is going to go everywhere. And this is where my hot glue gun comes in. So, and this is for ease, and this is for speed. You could certainly use the glue from the floral adhesive. Actually, I've just remembered something, so I will come back to that right at the end. So the first thing here you need to do is the ball, you would have noticed, it was like a little ball put into the mouth of the container. So you need to do some measuring. You need to cut your bare grass or your stripped down formium, and you need to get it to sit inside the jar. So I'm going to use the 2 soft ends of this, the 2 more pliable ends, just to roughly cut to begin with. So having that down inside the jar like this. Again, it's easy to do, it's just ever so slightly fiddly. So I've got myself a bit of an overlap. I'm going to just get rid of that extra bit because it's going to get in my way. So I've made this little bracelet. So I need to glue that together. So I'm taking my hot glue gun. Oops. And then a dab of glue. So the thing with a hot glue gun, it glues instantly, but it does leave a sort of milky, sappy trail. So a bit there, and of course it's hot, so just be careful when you're doing this. I'm struggling slightly because I've turned my desk round this time, and my extension lead isn't quite long enough, so I'm easing around. So I'm gluing mine twice because I've been a bit cautious, and I've given myself a little bit of an overlap. So a little dot of glue. Oops, there, this one. And hold it. And you can see, because I'm working live, you know, it's my workmanship isn't very good there. But as that dries, I can trim that off. Like that. So we've got one, which hopefully still fits inside the little container. Once you've got your first one done, we're only going to make 2 of these, you'll be pleased to hear. You can use this one as the guide. So I'm going to roll that around. Can you see as I'm rolling that round, this end here is sort of wanting to, it's a bit thicker, it's not bending so well. So I'm going to match it up like that, just to get the size right. We'll ping round a bit, like so. I reckon that is about right. My glue gun out again. I'm going for a dot there. That down, it's oozed again. And a dot just down there as well. And that's all the gluing I'm doing. Struggling a little bit here. Let's get that glue gun out of the way. And hold it down like that. So that is firm. I've gone a bit over the top with the glue, but this is for demonstration purposes. It's much easier when you work, you know, because you'll be able to fiddle around a little bit more, and it'll become more manageable for you. So. And then you take, imagine that's your equator. Imagine that's going pole to pole. You then have this little structure here. Actually, I'm going to have to use my glue one more time, because I want to glue those 2 bits together so it holds. And then we're going to do some weaving. So this is the non-glue part, to weave this little ball like that. So at this stage, we will need some more of our grasses. I'm just going to hold that just for a moment to make sure it's stuck. So I'm going to have a few more stems of grass. I've got 3 in my hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the more woody bits of the stem, because I want it to bend round. So I know straight away I don't need those. I'm tempted not to throw these bits away. I think I can use them in a future class. So I'll probably tie an elastic band around them, recut the stem ends and put them in my flower bucket to use again. So what I'm going to do is weave this through, and it's always tricky to get going. What I'm going to do is move it through a little bit and just hold it with my finger, and then with the nice floppy bit, the more pliable end, I'm going to go randomly in and out like that. So I've actually created another, oops, pinged round, another little sort of equator bit, another little belt perhaps would be a better word. But then I'm going to go off and just diagonally. And as you build this up, the structure will become more stable, and you'll start to see that you're getting a little grids where somewhere you can put your flowers through. And as you go through this is quite mesmerizing actually as you work. But I would just say, don't get too carried away, because if you put too many stems in, you're going to create a lovely ball, which you might want to use as sort of a little accent detail, but you're going to have no holes for putting through your statement flower. So we start to build up and round like this. And if you do think you need to glue at any point, you can glue bits down, but you don't want this to become just a gluey ball. You want it to, plant material to shine out, not the fixed things. So I'm just thinking, can I now start to weave in my woody ends and perhaps bury those ends into the center of the ball so they don't show. If you find they look too woody, you might want to trim them out. They may decide they want to ping out. That's something that you want to just be aware of. It's not a competition to see how far down you can go with your weaving. So you'll end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And I'm going to trim off those ends. And I think probably I'm going to use one more piece of grass. I seem to have quite a large hole at this end. So starting with my next piece of grass, it does become easier when you've got more grass in there, because you can do a definite weave more in and out. To begin with, you're just sort of weaving through fresh air, and it can be quite hard to pull it all together. That, and I might ping over that way and come around like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do there is cut off that end there because it's too woody. And now let's hope it fits inside my jar. It does, because it's quite pliable, it fits in there. And this is the tangle I was talking about in my handout. It's a tangle of glass, a bit like a very loose ball of wool is what you're aiming for. And then what you would do when you put your flowers in, you would put your statement flower in through one of the holes. Of course, you'll be putting water in this, and it will slide through and be held up. I'm just wobbling that down. So the advantage of not having any water is I can lighten its side. And then if you wanted to create a little bit of a finesse, if you've got more stems of your lily grass left, you could then, again, I'm just going to take off the woody bit at the end, you could start just, perhaps a little bit of a zhuzh round with your stems here to create a bit of natural movement, a counterbalance to the solidity of the glass jar. It keeps pinging out. Do you think these are going to shrink? Well, I will show you the one I did a week ago and we'll have a look. Oops. Just struggling to get that in there. There we go. So you can sort of bring the tangle out. Playing ball with me, but I did put in the sample piece. I had two pieces of grass that were locking in place. I guess if I persisted, I could always glue those in place, but you don't want to have them in that. To a degree, you're reliant on your plant material playing ball. Let me take, in answer to your question, whether it's going to hold in place, I'm going to just pour this water out from the one that I made. So I made this a week ago, this one, and you can see that I did the swirls are in there. So if I take this apart, let's have a look. So it's a week old. So as I take it apart, the loopy grass is just sit there. That was my zinnia, and you can see here the ball that I've made is slightly denser and holds together. I would say this is going to be something that is going to last, and it's clearly lasted in my my drinking glass for a week. Leaves do last well, but it's probably not something that you'll pick out next year and it will still be rigid. So I would say it's probably got perhaps a month life on it. And you can see here that if you made loads and loads, you could have your jar here and you could have your ball in your jar, and then you could have a few clustered around the edge. So do you remember when we did Sunflower class and we made a bare grass bulb at Easter time? I've still got mine, but it has definitely shrunk, but it has still kept its shape. So I'm probably, it's destined for the compost heap, but I only took that out of its little rose bowl container, the goldfish bowl, when I was cleaning my workshop out a couple of weeks ago. So it is you can see how it becomes quite sturdy, and it will hold. Obviously, if you're too heavy-handed, it's just going to crush. And you will need to put a quantity of grass in so it holds, but not so much that you haven't got any holes left to thread your flowers through and use it as a, a modern looking flower frog. So the thing I wanted to show you, I forgot to show you, was the dried, the curls of grass, which was in my little box here. The ones that I had shredded on the pin holder and then tried to sort of twist round to get a bit of shape to it. If you were building this up, you could start to have these pieces round as a little bit of a contrast to the straightness of the stems. And I can see there are comments saying, yes, you could put them in the container like this. So I can, without breaking it too much, you could slide them down and have another one on top, and that would be quite a lovely thing to do. It's that repetition again, which we all know from design is part of a good way of making your flower materials have more impact by repeating the little look. So you can get these little shaggy edges to it if you wanted to, but if they're touching in the water, they will they look a little bit like algae if you're going to keep it in for more than a week. I did have to clean this out, and it's gone a tiny bit slimy, and it does take up water again. But if you wanted to do that ahead of time, you could shred your glass, wrap it around your kebab stick, and let that dry. And what I should have done in hindsight was I should have put an elastic band or a piece of tape on either end, and it would have held. But I just had it in my glass, and as I let go of it, it released slightly, which is why I've got longer, looser spirals on there. So what I'm going to do now is to draw this to a close, and I'll show you what. So I hope you could see that sufficiently clearly. So in reverse order, a tangle of grass, so making your 2 circles to begin with, and then weaving in, and you will need to weave in a quantity of materials before it holds. And then this was when I then added in my flower, my statement flower. And then if you wanted to create that little bit of pizzazz of natural movement, that you would thread in, perhaps I used 2 stems, and I thought the 2 worked quite well together. And now I haven't got the camera in my way, of course I can do that far more easily. I was struggling a bit under the camera there. So you can just, add a little bit of a counterbalance to the very minimal look. Yes, Joan, I would, yes, it'll need water, but you need to think about water as a design element as well. So as long as your statement of flowers in water, that's fine. I don't think you need to go all the way up to the top. I don't think the grass needs to be submerged in water. This one wasn't from a week ago, and it held just fine. It still looked dark green and perky. And I would think about your water as I say, a design element. And my inclination is to always go quite low with the water rather than going really, really high. I just think it looks, to my eye, a nice look. And of course, if you were making a whole series of these to group down your dining room table, you might want to play with the heights, and you could have your water level going up and then coming down again. If you were making 15 or 20 of them, that would be a great way, again, add in some rhythm and movement to your arrangement. So then we had the little box here. Again, it does look different when you got water in. I can't show you the water on camera, but I will definitely add some photographs when I have finessed my look. And then, from those flowers I picked out of the garden, I have still got a few left. So I will be adding more of those in to finish off. And that's that little floating one on the side there. So before I draw the to a close on today's project, just talk about next week's project, just so you can have a think about what materials you need to look for. So we're going to be using a piece of wood. So I have got this tree stump branch piece of wood, which for me actually rather handily stands upright. It doesn't matter if yours doesn't stand upright. I've got a workaround for that. It may be that you want your piece of wood on the side, on the table in front of you, and it may be that you haven't got access to sort of a natural piece of wood, but you might have a piece of a timber that perhaps you've used in a fencing project, DIY project, something like that. You could use a piece of timber. And if the worst comes to the worst, what you will need is a really sturdy, straight-sided vase. You will be able to do a project with the vase. We're then going to need some sturdy wires. So for the sturdy wire element, I'm actually going to be using 2 coat hangers. I'm going to cut off the hooks. I'm going to drill holes or make holes in bradawl, and I'm going to insert without the hooks. This is a bit of a mock-up here, work with me. You're going to end up with your wires like this. So you've got like these horizontal tram lines at the top, and then we're going to use aluminium wire to make a swirl of wire across the top, and then with your test tubes, we're going to suspend our flowers in that. So that is, just so you can visualize what we're doing, is that without the hook showing on the outside edge. But in the event that you didn't have a piece of wood, what you'd actually be doing with your coat hangers would be using tape to actually bind them on the outside of your straight-sided, modern-looking vase. But I'm going to be cutting the hooks off this and pushing them in to the side of the piece of wood. So any questions, of course, you can reply to the email, leave a comment under the video. But those of you who are staying on for the Make and Create afterwards, you can quiz me about projects we've done today, and also a little bit more about what we've got planned for next week. So I'm going to stop the recording now and remove my spotlight, and then that's your opportunity to take yourself off mute, and we can get on with the rest of the show. So I shall see you all next week.